It's recorded. So getting started, I want to bring up just the first home screen to kind of give a little bit of a tour of what this looks like, and pause me at any time if you have questions. So this is the home tabs. This is what you usually see when you click on the word icon. For me, it's right at the bottom of my screen. I have it on the toolbar. It might be on your desktop or it might be under your start menu. Either one of those places, once you open it, this is usually the first thing that'll appear. And if you've worked on anything before, it'll show up here under these recent tabs. I've been working with some folks doing some hiring, so I have a bunch of resumes and cover letters that people have sent me up. So that's what I see. And then over here, under pinned, this is where you can put documents that you want to be able to access later. Mine's empty. I honestly never use this. I don't necessarily know of anyone who uses it too often, but it's handy if you have things that you regularly want to reference. And then shared with me is when you download documents into Word from somebody else. That one isn't typically used much either. When you're going to start something new, you can either go right up here at the top. They show some templates right away, kind of the basic ones, a blank document. They have this tour, which is Word's own little self-guided course through Word. This is a single space, just blank document as well, very similar to the other one, but it just has slightly different default spacing. There's a sample resume, a calendar, just some other tours through Word. If you want to see more, you would want to click on this new option. And there you see, once again, the default is that blank document, but you can scroll down and see a bunch more different types of templates. And depending on what you're working on, these can be really helpful as a place to get you started. And we'll talk more about those later in this course. Today we're going to talk mostly about making your own document from scratch. But you can see you can search for different things if you don't see what you're looking for on this menu right from the get-go. And then if you already have something you're working on, you can click Open. And it'll give you all these different options for where your documents might be. This is your default place for documents on your computer. And so this would be if you were, say, to go to this PC, go to My Documents, these are all the ones in here. And you can see it lists them in order. So last week and then older ones. And then you can go to Folders, and you can see which folders that you've accessed in the last while or so. And this can be handy too if maybe you didn't save it into your Documents folder and you're trying to browse around for it a little bit more. You can also, once again, go to those shared ones. If it was something saved on the cloud, it would be here. Or you can always go to this PC, add a web place, or browse. And this is typically how I find most of my documents that I work on. And you can see it brings up this, it goes immediately into the Documents library, but I can navigate around if I want. I could go to the desktop or to my downloads and pick out documents from there. But for now, we're just going to look at a new document. So we'll go to New, and we'll go to the default template, this blank document. And I think for most casual users of Word, this is probably what you'll use 90% of the time. And this probably looks pretty familiar. You have your standard document. There's a little cursor right there on the page. And just so that we're clear when I'm talking, usually I'll always refer to the little guy moving around on the screen as the cursor, even though you might hear someone call it the mouse or the arrow. Either way, it doesn't matter. I just call it the cursor. And when I say left click, I mean clicking on the left-hand side of the touchpad and right click the right-hand side of the touchpad. And same thing if you were using a mouse, either plugged into your laptop or plugged into your computer. So just making sure we're all on the same page with that lingo there. This is the home screen. This is the first thing you see when you open a Word document, and you'll see a lot of different options, all of your different clipboard options. And what that's referring to is there's a space, a temporary saved space on your computer where things that you copy live. And as soon as you copy something new, that space gets cleared and the new copied material appears there. But it allows you to paste, cut, copy. Right now I don't have anything selected for those options, but that's how you access those. And here it gives you lots of style choices for your font. Here, lots of options for setting up your paragraphs. And here, something a little bit more specific called style. Style has a lot more to do with templates, and we'll talk about that in a week or two. For the most part, I think when people use Word, they typically use this little section here and this little section here to format their text. Before we get into that, I just want to go one tab to the left to File and show what that looks like. This looks really similar to what we saw before. You have that home screen again, that new and that open option. And so you have the same options whenever you have a Word document open as you did when you first opened Microsoft Word for the first time. But you also get these other options too. So info tells you some information about your document. If I click on this, you could see whether or not it's password protected, different things about the metadata, how many pages, words, how long I've been working on it, just statistics like that. And here, save, this will just kind of by default save it to my to my documents folder. But if I'd saved this somewhere else before, it would save it somewhere new. So let's say we're saving this for the first time. We're going to save it as an original copy, and we'll hit Save As. And you'll see it gives you these options. It says recent, this PC, at a place. It looks a lot like that open folder before. And what it's asking for is where I want to save it. So I'll click Browse just so that I have as many options as I want. And on my desktop, which I'll click here, I have a folder specifically called Library. And since I'm doing this for the library, I'll save it in here. And we'll call this Word Lesson 1. So you type it in, hit Save, and now whenever I'm looking for it, that's what it'll be called. And you can see the document name at the top of the screen. My little Zoom window's right in front of that, so I don't get to see it, but I think you can. And so now if you were to upload this to a website or put it in a new folder, that's the address that you would use to find it. You would go to your desktop, to that folder, and then open up this document from there. So here, just to demonstrate that, what I'll do, I'm not sure how this will work. I'm going to close the window. And you can see, okay, so it stopped screen sharing for me. So we'll do my actual screen. We'll see how that works. You'll get to see my cluttered desktop. So from here, I would go to my library folder on the desktop. And here, I'd saved it as Word Lesson 1. So it'll be at the bottom, alphabetized. There it is. I can click it there. And it'll open Word for me. And now Word is up. And I think that should still be working. Yep, the screen is still being shared. So that would be how you'd open it or how you'd select it when you're browsing somewhere else. So now that you've got your document open, there's lots of different options for formatting it and getting started. For this particular example, I'll set it up like it's a resume just because I think that's a pretty common thing for folks to be working on. And the first thing that pretty much everyone will put on their resume is their name. So we'll just make up a name. This will be Jane Smith. And for Jane Smith, we want to give her a location too. So we're here in Bozeman. And you can always put a more specific address or not. And then you'd want to put contact information. And this is just the basic setup for any kind of resume that you're getting started. So let's say that. And then maybe we want a mobile number. And maybe that'll be, let's see, what would that be? It's probably going to be 406 570. I'm probably unfortunately typing someone's actual phone number considering I made this up, but hopefully it's not anyone's number. So let's say that's their contact information. Now this looks kind of messy. It's not really that easy to read. So we can do a lot of different things to change this. And now every time I wanted a new line, just so you're aware, what I'm doing is I'm hitting the Enter key. Now I don't have to do that. If I wanted to type down here, all I have to do is double click with my mouse. And so the cursor's there, I double click, and now you can see it's flashing there. So I could type here if I wanted to. Maybe I want to start typing the first part of the resume. I want to type the objective statement. And so maybe I'd write it like that. And so I could hit enter and start a new paragraph. And so maybe I'll just type as a professional, oops, helps if I spell right, with a background in, and it might go on from there. But just kind of playing with this a little bit, you'll see under this paragraph option, we have it selected by default, this left alignment. And maybe we want this contact information to stand out a little bit better. We can highlight that. So what I'm doing is I'm clicking and I'm dragging across the text with my cursor until it's all selected in that blue. And then what I'll do is I'll go up to the paragraph and click that center alignment. And you can see when I hover over it, it tells you a little bit about what that option does. It'll say, in this case, center your content on the page, gives documents a formal appearance, and is often used for cover letters, quotes, and sometimes headings. So this is a heading, so that makes sense. Now something else that looks a little funky here is the spacing. It's really spaced out throughout all of this, and maybe that's fine for certain documents, maybe that's fine for a letter, it makes it kind of easy to read, but this is something that's going to be kind of concise. So we'd want that spacing to be a little bit smaller, and there's a couple ways to change that. The fastest way to change that would be to go up to these styles and click no spacing. But notice what it does. It gets rid of that center alignment. When I change the style, it undoes all other formatting. It goes exactly to the formatting that they had before in that style to begin with. And it by default is left aligned, and so it switches to that as well, even though it also gives me that single spaced look. And in this case, it's easy enough to change. I just hit center again. But maybe I had done some more things to this and it really messed it up. There's another way to do it too. So I'm going to undo. And if you ever are working and you realize you want to undo something, up here at the very top, that's where our little undo button is. And you can click it once to undo one option, or you can go just a little to the right and there's a drop down and you can undo a bunch of different things. And it'll tell you a little bit of what those are, but it's not necessarily a clear description, but it usually kind of will jog your memory like, oh yes, I just typed that thing. So here we go. Now it's back. And oh, I went a little too far. I wanted it centered still. So I can redo it by clicking the button next to it, this little redo tool. And the shortcuts on the keyboard for that are Control Z and Control Y. Control Z is undo and Control Y is redo. And in that case, I'd hold down the Control key and then tap either Z or Y, depending which way I want to go. You'll also see up here, there's a Save button, and that will let you save the document at any time. It's the same thing as going to File and clicking Save. It'll save it to where it already is. Whereas if I wanted to save it in a new location, I'd have to go to Save As. So we'll hit Save. And what this is called is the Quick Access Toolbar. And you can customize it from this little arrow here. So if you ever find there's something that you're using a lot and you don't want to have to keep jumping between these little tabs to access it, you can go to this drop down and you can click More Commands, and it'll give this menu. And from this menu, you can take just about any command in Word. It has by default the popular commands, but you can go to all of them. And you can take any one of those, select it, and then click Add to move it onto the ribbon. One that I do fairly often is called Format Painter. So I'll go to popular commands again because that's just a lot to look at. And here it is right here, Format Painter. and I'll hit add. And now, once I hit OK, you'll see a little paintbrush appears right here, and it's the same as the paintbrush from there. So that's a way to customize it for yourself. So that was kind of a tangent. Going back to working on spacing, you'll want to do most of that from this paragraph tab. You can change it from the theme, but you can also do it more precisely by clicking this little drop down. So there's this that's spacing, and you can do it from there, and it'll say, well, that's single spaced, but it didn't look like it changed at all. So I typically like to go to this little arrow in the corner, which creates this pop-out menu. And in this paragraph menu allows you to make a lot of pretty finite changes. And so what it's doing is it's saying, okay, spacing, before a paragraph, there's 0 spacing. After a paragraph, there's an 8-point space in between, and that's what's creating that spread out look. So if we make that smaller, whoop, we go to 0, call it single line spacing, and hit OK. Now you can see it's lined up the way we want it. Now you'll also notice from here, and what I can do is I'll add some more text to this. I have set up on another document the text I was going to stick in here. Maybe it won't let me take it. Let me see. Boop, there we go. So all I'm doing is copying from another page, and I'm going up here and I'm clicking paste. And I'm guessing you could probably see that PDF too. Yeah. So what I've done is I've highlighted the part that I want to take with me to the other document. This is handy. You can do this from a website too, but I like to use it from another document. And what I'll do is I'll either right click with my mouse and select copy, or I'll hold down the control key and tap C. They'll do the exact same thing. And now it's copied to my clipboard. So when I go back to Word now, what I can do is I can highlight this section that I'm replacing, because that's kind of superfluous. I already copied that. And I'm going to hit the delete key, and that'll go away. And now I'll go up here and I can just click paste, and that'll work. The other thing you'll notice, there's a drop down, and sometimes there's other options. And this matters more if you're copying content from a website. Sometimes it'll try to copy it as a picture, or it'll change the formatting around a lot. And so that's why it's sometimes useful to keep track of things here and click that little drop down arrow. But for the most part, you can just click paste or click Control V, and that'll do the same thing. And you'll notice, because we copied it from another source, some of the formatting's weird. And so if you're ever wondering what is going on, what you can do is in that paragraph little section of the Home tab, we can click this, and this shows paragraph and formatting markers. This is really handy if you're just not sure what's happening on a page. So now what we can see is every place where there's a space bar, like a space bar was pressed for a space, there's a dot, and every time an enter key has created a new paragraph, it puts a paragraph symbol. And so what we can do is go in right before any of those and hit the delete key and then a space to clean that up a little bit. And sometimes those paste options will help you avoid that, but other times they don't. And you just kind of have to go in after and see what's going on. And all I did to turn that off was to click that button again. So now we have an objective statement and some contact information. And maybe we want to see what this looks like indented like a normal paragraph. Now, one way to do that is to hit Tab. So I'd go up here and I'd just hit the Tab key on my keyboard, and you'll see this little button pops up. It says autocorrect options. Well, what's that? It is a formula of sorts that's put into words so that anytime you make certain choices, so an enter then a tab in this case, it starts a new paragraph automatically for you. And it recognizes it that way. What tab more specifically does is it moves you, oops, don't need to update my computer right now. Sorry about that. It pushes your cursor from one spot to another. You'll see I have up here this little ruler, and now I'm lined up under this little arrow. If I were to hit tab again, it would push that arrow to the 1. So I'll hit tab, and now it slid it all over again, but it pulled this with it. I can use these to adjust how those tabs work as well. So in this case, I could pull this over back to that gray line that indicates where my margin ends, and I can keep that there. Or I can say, oh, actually, I don't like that. I want to pull it back. And I can drag that along too. So you can adjust your paragraphs this way. It will only do this for one section. Notice that it didn't pull it for the objective title there, nor did it change anything about the top. It recognizes which text is in one big chunk, and it highlights this kind of when it does that formatting. If you want to apply things to a whole section of your document, another thing you can do is highlight it, go to that little pop-out arrow, and then adjust it from here. And you can add indentation like this. And so by default, on the left, it has no indentation, no right indentation, and the special, where it says, is the first line. And so in this case, it's indicating that it is in paragraph form, and that first line is indented. And it indents it by 0.5. If I click none and hit OK, it pulls it back over. On the other hand, if you're doing citations, you'll want a hanging indent, and that's where all lines except the first one are indented. And I'll just show you what that looks like so you can see. So this is where you would have that first author and then the title of the paper you were citing and such like that. That doesn't make sense here, so we'll go back and we'll make it a first line indent. There we go. And so that's sort of the basics of playing with how your format looks. There's some little shortcuts here, decrease indent, increase indent, and those will help you out too. If you're making kind of a quick change, this will work as well. Give it that double spacing between each line. But we usually want single space. And if you're not sure what's going on in a particular section, you can always click in that line and hit this, and it'll give you the exact statistics. So in this case, it has a bit of a space afterwards, and we could, tweak that to be 6 or 0, whatever we want, however we think looks best. Now the rest of the document you can change with other types of formatting here in font. And the most useful ones, I think, are put right on top. And so I don't typically worry about using this pop-out too much, but you can do the same thing from here. I just think this is a little bit overwhelming sometimes, but it gives you different options that you don't have on the menu, like this double strike through. So you can see a little preview down here of what it'll do, and it puts 2 lines through whatever you're working on. Do a single strike through. But most of these you can get somewhere else. The other ones that are kind of useful though, and I'll highlight objective here to kind of show how this will work, is if you're changing the way your capitalization looks. Maybe you meant to do something in all caps, but you forgot while you were typing. Anymore. You can also do small caps, which is hand titles, where the first letter is bigger, but it's still in all caps. Or there's a way to switch caps, and it doesn't seem to be up here at the moment. Oops, what has it done? I'm being told my internet connection is unstable, but that's okay. I think it'll be fine. So let's see. I haven't tried hidden before, and it just hid the text. So I didn't want that. I'm going to hit undo. There we go. Now it's back. Let's say we had done this in all caps. And of course, I'm doing the exact thing that I said you didn't have to do, but we'll type it that way. Let's say I want to do switch caps. I could do it from here too. So once again, those options, you get it from that dropout box, but you can also do it the other way too. So that toggle case, maybe you had caps lock on and you didn't mean to, and it'll switch it around for you. We'll make that sentence case again. You can also do capitalize each word, which is handy for titles. So there's lots of options up there. This is also where you can change the font, which I think most people are pretty familiar with. Highlight whatever you want to change. Click in here, and it'll give you a whole list. My personal favorite is Georgia font, but it's a little bit big for this, so maybe Times New Roman. You can also change the size up here. Maybe I want it just a little bit bigger so it's easier for folks to read. Can do it like that. And you'll notice there's one thing on this page that looks a little funny, and it's this email address. And what happened was when I typed that, it did another one of those autocorrect options. And it turned, when it saw that .com, it turned that into a hyperlink. So if I were to hold down Control and click on this, it would try to send an email to this person. And if I don't want that, what I can do is I can click Undo Hyperlink. If I never wanted this to happen again, I could hit Stop automatically creating hyperlinks, but sometimes it's useful, so I like to keep that up. But for here, I'll just hit Undo. And now it looks like normal text as before. And so this is kind of handy. Sometimes you can do different formatting things. Maybe instead of a comma here, I want some sort of border. Borders live here under paragraph, and I can just put it somewhere like this, maybe right in the middle, inside vertical border. That didn't quite do what I wanted. But let's try this. It lets me draw a table. So what I can do is I can just draw in, oh, a table. Well, I guess that line isn't going to go there. Silly me for trying to go off script and come up with something funny to do in the middle. But anyhow, there's all kinds of different formatting that you can do from here too. Maybe the next thing that you're working on is you want to make this stand out a little better, so you highlight it, make it bold, maybe even underline it. And then maybe you want that in the next section too, so you'll hit Enter. And now it's tabbed it over like a paragraph. If I don't want that, all I have to do is hit Enter again, hit Backspace, and then hit Enter again. And now I've created some space in between, and you'll notice it's still under normal. And if I go to this paragraph, it has that bigger spacing. Now I want to get rid of that, so we'll get rid of it, hit OK. And now I should be able to type the next section. So maybe this is going to be Summary of Qualifications. And say I really like how this formatting looks under Objective. Now it's pretty simple, it's just bold and underlined. But if maybe it was a little more complicated and I didn't want to have to go through and create those settings all over again, I can use this format painter, and that's why I like this. And if I click the formatting I like, click the format painter, then it gives me this little brush that I can then pull across a section of text, and then it applies that formatting to that new section. And so if I want to turn those off for the next line, I can just click this, and now they're off. Or I could have started typing and then copied the formatting from this section. Either way will work. So now I'm in a new line, and maybe I want this to be bulleted. If I want to do that, probably the easiest way is to go up here and put in a bulleted list. And from here, by default, it just has this little dot bullet. And you can change these however you want. Maybe I want an empty dot, just a circle. But you can do just about anything else. You can put in these funny stars or these arrows or this check mark. You can even make your own bullets from here, but I think that's probably not necessary in this situation. So maybe I just put in trustworthy, self-driven employee, things like that. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. But anyway, you can see how a list would highlight this information a little bit better. Oops. And now you can see I've made a misspelling here. And because I've done that, it's highlighted it with red. And you can do a lot of different things to fix this. Obviously, I know how to spell under. I can just type in a D. But maybe this was a word, if this was a word I didn't know how to spell, I could right-click it with my mouse. And you'll see it gives me these different options of what it thinks maybe I was trying to say. Under, user, tuner. Either way, those can be helpful sometimes. The other thing that it lets you do, let's say I fix this, and I could have clicked those to fix that too. Something that I can do from a right click, and now that it's spelt right, it doesn't give me those spelling options, but it does give me this synonym option. And it gives me some options right away. But if I want something a little more maybe interesting, I can click on this thesaurus tool, and it'll bring up the thesaurus on the side here. And this can be helpful if you're typing along and you just need a little inspiration. You're just not coming up with quite the right word. And you can look at these and see, okay, well, this is getting closer. In this case, it doesn't quite make sense, but you can click on any of them and see what happens once you get that one in the search bar underneath, maybe below. And for different words, this will give you some more options. This one's pretty straightforward. If we were doing something like engaging, that would probably have some more interesting words. You can see it gives even different types of definitions. Engaging as in attractive, engaging as in involving or appointing. Engaging can mean to battle. So it gives all those different sorts of options here. And you can kind of narrow down exactly what you're going for from that. So that can be pretty helpful. And all of these tools for editing your work live under this review tab. And we'll click around and get over to there now. And you can see up here, this is where the basic proofing is. The spelling and grammar, the thesaurus, and the word count. And you'll also notice there's a word count down here at the bottom too. This tells you the total words for this document that you're working on. Over here, the same thing, number of pages, what language you're working in, because you can also change words so that you can type in other languages. In this particular version of Word, I have it set up that I can, if I want to, switch it to Spanish. I don't want to do that here, but sometimes if you're working on something in another language, it's obviously helpful to have Word in that language so that it's not trying to, correct your spelling on everything. On the same sort of note, because it has access to all of these different foreign language dictionaries, you can also translate within your document. Mine tends to have a hard time doing this because I didn't set it up very well. But if I wanted to translate, say, this paragraph, translate selection, it'll pop this up. Brings up the translator, it tells me what it automatically detects it to be, and I can say, okay, well, what would this be in, I'm not sure, let's see, Italian. And it gives me something that is probably loosely equivalent. I don't speak Italian, so I could not tell you, but if I thought this looks good, I could hit insert, and it would be replacing this in my document here. On the other hand, if I don't want it, I can just hit close and it's gone. So that's kind of the basics of proofing in Word. But there's obviously all these different options. Track changes is really useful if you're sharing a document with somebody else and they're making changes on your document. So for instance, maybe they want to add a note here and say maybe we'll track changes and we'll type in trustworthy self-driven employee, Maybe they want to say, all right, you need a comma here, and you want to add while working with minimal supervision. And you can see it appears in a different sort of color and it's underlined too. So now that I'm done, I'll click out of track changes. And what you can do, say you've received this document back with this change, I hover over it with my cursor and it says who changed it, me, when I changed it, and exactly what that change was. Now if I like that, I can right click it and I can hit accept insertion, or I could reject it if I wanted to. In this case, I'll accept, and you'll see it then turns the formatting back to what it was before. And it looks like I'm all done, but I inserted a comma too. And to let me know that there's still more to check, they put this little bar in the corner. That lets me know that somewhere in that line there's still a change that I haven't looked at. And so if I go here, I can say, oh, yep, and I can accept it from up top too. It'll highlight it for me, and then I'll hit it again, and it's done. It gives me a little notification that all of the changes have been accepted or rejected. There's no more to check. So that's how the basics of reviewing work in Word. Now, we've kind of explored the Home tab pretty well, looking at the different options for changing the size. This little guy, we'll change it one size at a time. It'll go up one. This little guy will go down one. We've also looked at bolding, italics. Obviously, if you're putting in a quote or a title, you'll use that. Strike through is helpful sometimes for formatting. I don't use it too much. And this subscript and superscript are usually useful more if you're kind of writing with math or writing an equation like that. Over here is word art, text effects and typography. So maybe you wanted to make your name really fancy. You can click that little drop down and you could add any of these different effects to your text. And you could make it a little more specialized by going into here and then adding exactly what you want. In this case, it doesn't make sense, but say you're doing some sort of fun, fancy family newsletter, that would be a place where that would work pretty well. Now I just hit Control Z to undo that. So now that we've kind of explored everything up here, let's go to this Insert tab. So the Insert tab allows you to put all different things inside your Word document, from tables to different breaks, which are pretty important. Let's say you needed this to be written as a cover letter and everything else had to be on a separate page. What you could do is you could insert what's called a page break here, and it would put the rest of your text on the next page. As you can see, has this information here. Everything has moved down. If I want to get rid of that page break, I can just hit Backspace twice. And now it's back up at the top. And I'll hit Enter once to create that spacing again. Also, cover page is an option in itself, and so you can do that as well. I like hitting the little drop down because it'll give you some different options. So if you're writing a report and your report needs a cover page, you could click something like this and it'll insert that in front of all of the rest of your text. So it'll make that the first page. So I'm going to hit undo. Boop, there it's gone. And we'll look at some other things. So now here I have this hanging bullet. If I want to get rid of it, I can just click down below, hit Backspace once, hit Backspace again. It pulls me over a tab. One more time, and I'm back in the same alignment as the rest of my paragraphs, and I can hit Enter now and move down the page. If I want to put in a table, I could do it from here. It wouldn't make sense to have it under a bullet, so that's why I did that. And I could add as many as I want. This is my favorite way of making a table, is clicking the little drop down and then adding these little sections, but we'll go into that more next week. Just showing you mostly what's available to use. Inserting pictures, you can obviously do that from a copy and paste, but you can do it from here too by opening up a file if it's already saved on your computer. Same thing with online pictures and shapes. The Draw tab is something that's really only specific to Word 365, and that happens to be what I'm working in. Everything else is pretty much the same. This has a little bit of different AI tools in it where I could draw something with my mouse and it would convert it to numbers and symbols for me, which is useful and handy sometimes. Other times it doesn't quite know what I'm trying to do, so it's hit or miss. I think it's something that Word will keep working on. Design is not a tab that I typically use unless I'm making a template, and it allows you to access these things called themes, which kind of set up all of those styles to be specific to a theme. So if I were under design and I were to click this theme here, basic stylish, and it didn't make many changes to my document. So let's see what happened. We'll go to home and you can see, oh, that's because the normal setting is just about the same. And it only applied this change to after where my cursor was. If I click up here, we'll see that it has not updated that. Interesting. So if I were to highlight all of this, now it says that it's not part of that theme. So we could go to design and click that again. And I think from here we would have to say this and it would change all that formatting again. Typically those are things you'll set up at the beginning when you're setting up your document for the first time. Because every time that you make formatting changes, it doesn't change the style at all. So it says, I want this style, but I want all of these changes that I've already made. And so in that way, it doesn't make too many changes if you just click around. Whereas if I were to click down here, click normal, and maybe click a title, maybe a heading, that probably makes more sense, and call this professional experience. Now I could go to this design and change things around in my document, and it would change those things that are left with the default settings under style. So you can see the little preview change as I move my cursor around. So that's just an example of sometimes why having these themes can be useful, but it's typically not how I see most people use Word. The other tab that is sometimes used quite a bit is View, and this is helpful when you're trying to set up how you want to see your document. So over here, this is called the read aloud mode. And what this does is it sets it up so it's two pages next to each other. It looks like a book. And so in this case, I only have one page. So it just has that first page split in two so that it has an easy to read setup. It's kind of like if you were to take a single typed page and turn it into 2 pages of a book. If I want to get out of this, it looks like maybe that would be hard, except there is a view option here, and that's actually still pretty different. It doesn't let me go back. So I'd want to use this at the bottom. And you can see it has that read mode here at the bottom. I can click print layout, and now I'm suddenly back to where I was before. Web layout is helpful if you're making content that's probably going to go up on a website and you want to see how it fits the whole screen if it gets stretched all the way across. So it's helpful for that. These other ones, outline and draft, those I have honestly never used, but what it does is it converts your text into the format of an outline, which is a little bit strange. So I'm going to close that. And draft does the same thing, but makes it this way. And it makes it look like a written out rough draft. I'm not sure why that would necessarily be helpful, but it is an option. So I'm going to go back to my print layout because I think that is the most useful one to look at. and go over just a few more viewing options. So here is where I have the ruler turned on. I like having this on. I think it's pretty discreet, but if it's distracting, you can always click where the checkbox is, and that will get rid of it for you. Now it's hidden and the document takes up a little bit more of the page. But you can also go the other way, go a step further and add grid lines. So maybe you're trying to line up a picture. You can click this and then you can see pretty well where you want to set up this document. Makes it a little easier if you're trying to follow, that 1-inch line, like, okay, there it is. Now I can go down and see that falls right here. So it's helpful for that. But it's a little distracting if you're still working on typing and such. Zoom is also pretty handy. Most of the time it's set at 100%, but you can probably imagine situations where you want to see the whole page at once. And so that's why there's these little shortcuts here. So one page lets you see how that whole page looks. Multiple pages, there's only one page here, but it would line them up side by side and it would look pretty much like that read mode view. And then the other option is page width, and it makes the width of the page take up the full screen. And if you ever want to go back to 100, click right there. To tweak it, you can click this little guy, and it gives you some little presets, or you can set it specifically through here. We'll hit OK. And you can do the same thing from this little bar down at the bottom where we see these other typical views, the read view, the print view, and the web layout. And you can then zoom in or out by moving that little bar, or by clicking that plus or that minus. That'll work too. And so that is roughly my introduction to Word. So let's say we're going to save it one more time. We could go here, hit save. And now we have our most updated version. And I wanted to save a little bit of time for questions. And next week we'll go into a little bit more of advanced formatting and things like that. This is kind of just the basics of how to open and navigate in Word, as well as put in text and make minor adjustments to get it set up the way you want. So with that, I'll pause the recording. So just to go over one more thing, we did have a question at the end, and I had turned the recording off for a moment so that we could do it one-on-one. But the question was, is there a place for unsaved documents? Say you forget to save your Word document and you want to go back and work on it or find it. Word does save it automatically for you. Now it won't save it with the title that you give your document, but it has it in its own little place and you can find it and open it and work on it from there and then save it once again. So what you would do is, so say this crashed right now and I had made some changes. The next time I opened Word, it would bring up an option for recovered documents. And those recovered documents would be things that I could click on and they would open up right where I left off, maybe 1 or 2 seconds off. It does these autosaves pretty regularly. And you can see up at my corner, this is where the autosave is. Right now it's actually off, but I can turn it on. Oh, actually, excuse me, other way around. Right now I have it on. Clicking this button will turn it off. And let's say, for instance, it was a document that I hadn't even saved once, and I was just, maybe I didn't open it the first time I went back into Word. There's still a way to find it. In this case, I don't have any documents like that, but I'll show you where they would live. So I'd go to this File tab, and then I would go to Open. And right here, where it says Open, it's under Recent, and it's under Documents. All the way down at the bottom, right below where the scroll bar ends, is unsaved documents. And if I click this, it redirects me to this folder, allows me to browse for these unsaved files. And so if there was something in here, I could click it and I could click open and it would open that Word document back up for me. So that's the story of Word and the unsaved documents. So hopefully that was helpful, and thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful day.